Welcome to this Decoding Digital Media webinar brought to you by Media Impact International, MII, in partnership with Faith Tech. I am your host, Nachi Lazarus, and today we are talking about 2024 top trends. And with me, I have two guests who have been there, who have done that, who have seen various trends come and go, and they are constantly experimenting with new trends. I have Neil Smith and Katie Aldred with me. I will introduce them in a minute, but I just want to encourage you to tune in today without any distractions. And it's important for you and me as media ministry leaders and media teams to be focused on what 2024 brings. That is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a few important trends that you need to make a note of. So pull out your pen, pull out your paper, sit in a quiet place and take some notes and think and pray about what God wants you to do in 2024. I can't wait to get started. Just a few things before we get started. Let me take a minute to introduce our guests to you. Katie Aldred is an experienced marketing communication leader with expertise in partnership management and strategic decision making. With a history of leading successful initiatives in tech and founding the influential platform churchcommunications.com, which many of you may be already part of, Katie has demonstrated her skills in community building, event planning, and mentoring. We are excited to have Katie Aldred with us. Our next guest is someone who is already familiar to most of you, my dear friend Nils Smith. And Nils is the Chief Strategist of Social Media and Innovation at Dunham & Company, helping Christian ministries around the world accomplish their goals through cutting-edge technologies. Prior to joining Dunham & Company, Nils served as an innovation pastor at Community Bible Church in San Antonio, Texas, launching the ministry of onlinechurch.com. And this initiative reached more than 15,000 online worship attendees weekly and grew an online Facebook community to more than 800,000. Nils is the author of Social Media Guide for Ministry and Crypto for Good. He lives in New York City with his wife Katie and two daughters, Shelby and Emery. We are super excited to have Nils once again in this Decoding Digital Media webinar with us. Just like all of you, I also can't wait to get this conversation started. But before that, we have two more simple housekeeping stuff, so please bear with me. First is the Q&A, questions and answers. If you have any questions, or if you simply have a comment or you want to say something, we want to encourage you to engage with us. So please click the Q&A button and please share your thoughts, your questions, your feedback, or whatever you want to share. You guys have been fantastic in the past webinars, the way you've engaged with us. So we want to continue to encourage you to do that. Thank you so much. And we also have an exciting offer for the first time in this Decoding Digital Media series, where we have a giveaway. Yes, we are going to give away 1 hour of coaching time with an MII coach. You all know Media Impact International has high caliber coaches from all over the world. These are some of the best in the space. These are people with experience, expertise, and one of them will be spending 1 hour of time with you, coaching you through media ministry. You can ask any questions. You can use that 1 hour in whatever way you want to make the most of 2024. Now we can get into my conversation with Katie and Nils. Let's get started. Katie and Nils, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Nils, you've been here before. Katie, this is your first time. Welcome. I introduced you guys formally at the beginning, but now I would like our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So if you can share two things. One is a personal detail about you, something that you want our audience to know, and also professional, something related to your work or ministry that you want our audience to know. So Katie, you go first.
Yeah, so I founded churchcommunications.com and have been running that for almost 10 years now, and really enjoy just working with churches and different ministries that need help doing communication, need help doing marketing, and understanding all these changes that are happening. There's definitely a huge communication shift, and helping churches and nonprofits understand how to communicate more clearly not only to like their congregation, but to their community, I think is really important. So that is what I've been working on. And, maybe an exciting update would be I actually am really excited. I am teaching at Belmont this next spring and teaching a course on social media planning and management. So that's exciting. And I mean, I've done that before. I've taught that course before, but it's always fun to do it at a new university.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Nils?
Yeah, so my personal highlight is I was a youth pastor for the first decade of ministry, and I now have two kids that are in the youth group at our home church at Hillsong Church here in New York City. So I've got a sixth grader and eighth grader, and I'm a girl dad. So that's a fun, kind of personal connection. And tied to that, one of the things that's interesting and unique is I've stepped in to serving as our online community pastor at our local church, and I preached at our church for the first time. I hadn't preached in 15 years a couple Sundays ago, and when I moved to New York City 10 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be preaching not in the middle of Times Square, but in a nightclub in Times Square, and that was a just a cool moment to get to kind of serve within my local church. And we're just in a fun season as a family with two youth group kids in the house now.
That's fun.
Wow, that's awesome. Excellent. So today we are talking about 2024 trends. So even before we get into that topic, what does 2024 mean to you both, Nils?
Yeah, I mean, it means I'm old, and I'm coming to a place in life where I actually was doing a training with some Navy SEALs the other day, and I was asking how do we encourage people in leadership, basically the old guard, to adopt new technologies. And they said, I hate to tell you this, you're the old guard now. And I'm realizing that I'm in my 40s, and I when I remember when I first saw TikTok, I thought this is dumb. And I definitely thought that when I first saw Snapchat. And so I think I'm finding that sometimes it's even as an innovator, new technologies, changing landscapes are more challenging to adopt. And the challenge is it's moving faster than it's ever moved before. And so in the past, where we've needed to adopt at a certain rate of speed, and we've lagged, but now at the rate of change, it's even harder to keep up. So I think as an innovator, it's exciting, but as a leader, it's complicated. And so I think that's when I look at 2024, who knew what we were going to run into with AI in 2023, and so who knows what's around the corner in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, what does 2024 look like to you from your perspective?
Yeah, it seems like everything is speeding up. I don't know if that's the way you feel, Niels. And so I am intentionally slowing down because everything is speeding up and finding like especially now that we have AI and so many tools that help us do our jobs, like what helps me do my job the most efficiently so I have my time back to spend with family and friends instead of like what can make me produce the most work possible. I'm thinking what can help me produce the best work possible in the least amount of time so I can get back to what's important, right? And I think too, like I am, yeah, like Neil said, I'm becoming the old guard. I'm becoming like the person who, had the opinions 10, 15 years ago. And so what does that mean, and I think a lot of that means to me, I'm actually going back to a lot of basics and a lot of understanding that, you don't necessarily need the most complex website to reach your community. Sometimes the simple stuff is the best. And so I am kind of leaning back into that instead of always like thinking, oh, I've got to have, and we're going to talk about all these tools. Like I love tools, so I'm going to talk about them. But at the same time, like I'm also leaning into how can I make my life more simple?
I feel like our whole industry, the whole tech, digital, social media industry is going back to the basics. On one side, we have this AI and this whole new thing, and there's a change and everything is changing. And then the other side is like nothing is changing, go back to the basics. So I think 2024 is like a combination of both. It's both like tradition and innovation kind of coming together. So that's the way I see 24. I'm very excited about it. Coming to trends, I know our audience are eager to listen from all of us to get the trends that we have brought for them. So first, I ask Nils to jump in with digital media online ministry trends. So what are some of the big trends? I know you have two big trends that you want to present, and then we will talk about that. So take it away, Nils. What is the first big trend that we need to look for in 2024 when it comes to digital media ministry?
Yeah. So when I think about digital ministry, I'm always thinking about how can we reach more people with our message. And, the digital trend that I thought, would be important to lead with is short form vertical video. And the reality is this isn't a new trend. This was actually a huge trend in 2023, but it's my prediction that this trend is not going to just level out in 2024. It's going to continue to grow and expand. And I think, Nachi, as you mentioned earlier, that it's often good to look back at what was happening in digital marketing. It has happened through the years. And what's interesting in social media is I remember, 10, even 15 years ago, we got Hootsuite and everything on social media was text based. And you would just write one post and you would use Hootsuite to put it on MySpace, to put it on Facebook, to put it on, whatever Twitter, to put it on all the platforms that were around back then. And you didn't know where it was going to catch, but you just posted one thing everywhere. Well, the reality is platforms begin to differentiate, and Instagram looked different than Facebook, which looked different than Twitter, which functioned different than YouTube. Well, today it's one form of content that is most popular on essentially every platform. And so you can create one short form vertical video and you can post that as a YouTube short, which is what's being prioritized on that platform, as an Instagram and Facebook reel, which is what's being prioritized on those platforms, as TikTok, which is what TikTok is. And even now Twitter or X is beginning to prioritize short form vertical video within their platform. And you hear Elon all the time talking about video. Now he's trying, I think, to really go the long form video, but they're integrating short form into their platform as well. So I think it really starts with, and I think will continue to be, and the platform that I believe is actually going to really begin to get the most attention is YouTube, with YouTube Shorts, where TikTok introduced this trend. And just as Instagram kind of copied stories from Snapchat, YouTube is integrating, TikToks into their platform. And I believe that that's what's going to just expedite this continued growth. And I think it then, from a ministry leader standpoint, gives us the opportunity to prioritize that kind of content development because it has so much engagement across the board.
Yes, and what we saw in 2023, I totally agree. It's not slowing down in any way. I mean, it's only accelerating. It's only become bigger and bigger and bigger. Both from TikTok perspective and from Instagram, YouTube, all of them. I mean, it's just been accelerating, and YouTube especially has been really accelerating this. I totally agree. I think it's a very important thing to think about in 2024 as to how do you get the attention of your audience, because as ministries, we are all vying for the attention, and millions of people, billions of people every day are giving their attention to the short form vertical content. So thanks for that. Any thoughts on that, Katie?
Yeah, I think I agree that short form video is here to stay. Now, what does it look like if it is always going to be 16 by 9 or 9 by 16, excuse me, is like, I don't know, is interesting. And I'm interested to see how that's going to continue to shape and form. But for sure, I actually haven't even looked at YouTube Shorts. So Niels, that's news to me. And I think though, but I'm not a YouTuber. Like, I don't really spend a lot of time on YouTube. Like, I am definitely more into TikTok. I will spend hours on TikTok, and that's bad. But so I do think that's interesting. That, and I don't know, maybe that's a demographic thing. I wonder if like men versus women, like I wonder if there's like a difference too there. I think for sure with Instagram Reels there probably is.
The interesting trend that is happening, to your point, Katie, is that when you look at TikTok and YouTube, TikTok has a very more higher female engagement. But in a younger audience, but the average user on TikTok is spending over an hour a day on the platform, which when you compare that to Facebook or Instagram, you're talking 15 to 22 minutes, I think, is on Instagram. And then on YouTube, though, it's similar with like an hour and 15 minutes is the average consumer spending on that platform. But YouTube is that platform that everyone is on. Like my grandparents, even before they passed away, were on YouTube, and my kids started watching YouTube videos at like 3 or 4 years old. It's kind of across the board platform, but I think we have always seen YouTube as just video, as just 16:9, and now this move to 9:16 on YouTube is a pretty big shift, and it's probably the biggest shift that YouTube has ever made in the history of their platform. And it is where they're differentiating, because what you're also seeing is we moved from like 2 minute long. We'd always say like cut it shorter for YouTube. Now they're saying make it longer for YouTube, because longer gets better engagement and average view time is longer. So it's really, they're creating two different kinds of videos platforms on YouTube. And so it's a really interesting shift for these platforms. But I do think YouTube will globally will continue to see the most expansion and has probably the greatest mass adoption of any digital platform on the internet today.
I have a question for you on that, Nils, because our audience are a mixture of church leaders, we've got ministries leaders, and we've got nonprofits. So, and most of them are long form content people, right? We've got sermons, we've got long videos, we've got explanations, workshops, all that kind of stuff. So, what's your recommendation, both of you? What are you seeing, Nils first? What are you seeing in terms of producing these vertical short form content? Do we cut these longer form content, zoom them in, like kind of do an edit of our horizontal video and create a vertical one? Or do you want people to actually do a separate 1 minute thing, which is what I do? Like when I create a long form video, I create a separate long form video. I don't trim it. But I have done that a few times, but I prefer to do shorts and reels separately, because I know that's a different way of communication. So have you seen anything? Would you prefer something? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would start by taking what you're already creating and, I always say like squeezing the orange, like get everything out of it. But the reality and I say this I've seen both go viral, but I am seeing greater virality in content that is specifically created as shorts. And so when you can create additional content that is just dedicated for shorts, you're going to probably get better engagement on that content, because it is so intentionally, when you think about a hook and a 30-second message and then a quick close, versus just you're taking something that was made to be an hour and then cutting 60 seconds out of it. It's harder to get that just right, to get the virality that you're looking for. That said, I think it's a both and game, and you might not have time for the and of dedicated content. So start with clipping out your long form content, but then when you're able to then start making very specific content for shorts, I think that's where you're going to get the best engagement. So I think it's a both and game, not an either or.
Got it. Katie, any thoughts? What are you seeing in the church your groups, your memberships?
Yeah, definitely seeing a lot of the same. I think church leaders are still working on what does that mean, and who is going to be the face of this? I think there's still a lot of that. That was a struggle for me 10 years ago. Even when I was making content that was just like pictures, and photos, it was who's going to be the face of this question, right? And because your pastor doesn't always have enough time to be the face of it. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing for us to figure out. I do think that you should designate somebody to do that, because I think no matter what, somebody's going to be it regardless. So figuring out or you're just going to be behind. It's like one or the other, right? Like you're either just not going to create the content, or you're going to create the content when somebody else is probably going to have to be the face of it somewhat. And so introducing topics and things like that, it might be followed up with your pastor's content and sermons and whatnot, but having someone else to explain and go into those things, I think is going to be really important.
Absolutely. I just want to encourage our audience to experiment with a few forms, try both, like Neil said. Also, watch a lot of your domain content, because one of the ways to really get comfortable with short form content is to watch what others are doing, because there are many ways to do this. You can do dual thing. You can shoot yourself in two different angles, like you're talking to each other. There's a lot of ways to do short form content. So there's just not one way. So I would say just watch a lot of different styles and see what works for you. If it is humor, if it is teaching, if it is just headshot, there are different ways. So experiment with them. But 2024, do not ignore short form content. That's all three of us unanimously agree on that.
Just want to quickly jump in and remind you to ask your questions or simply leave your comments or feedback or whatever you want to share, maybe a word of appreciation in the Q&A section. So just tap on the Q&A tab that you see and share your comments, feedback, or suggestions. We appreciate you taking the time to do that. Thank you so much.
Great. Nils, I know you've got an exciting next topic that everybody's asking. Like, one of the things that everybody asks us, even here in MII, the question we get a lot on is AI, artificial intelligence, those two magic words. So I know you have your next trend is about that. So take us into that.
Yeah, so my next trend is exactly that. It is a surge of AI generated content, and that's a big, I think, phrase, and that takes a lot of different directions, and I think even part of the conversation around AI has to be even the ethics of AI. Is what are you generating, and what is from you, and what is from a machine. And when it comes to a ministry context, we want to make sure that a machine effectively represents us. And so I think there are opportunities for us to use these machines, to use this technology to, create efficiencies and even make our content more effective. And so, I actually have a YouTube channel that I'm tinkering with, in my digital laboratory, I call it, where the whole thing is generated by AI. I literally will say, I actually have AI generate a list of video ideas from my channel, and then from the video ideas I have it create a script, and then from the script I have it literally create a video. I use a platform called invideo.io, and it will do a AI voiceover and AI video backgrounds, and it's a faceless AI video, and then I use Canvas AI, graphic designer, to create the thumbnail, and it's all basically generated by AI. And so it is amazing what AI can do. Now, I don't think you need to just have all of your content now generated by AI. I think we will begin to use AI to create captions for us. Maybe AI is, I use a tool called Opus Pro to create clips out of my long form videos to have shorts. And it's actually using AI to see what that machine believes will be the most viral, shorts out of my long form content. And so there's lots of tools out there, I think, that can help us create more and better content. And so I think we almost just have to figure out, where do we begin to integrate? But I think it's not just going to be, all manual anymore. And, I think AI and these kind of automations are going to be a core part of how we create. And I think probably the biggest, most powerful part of it is it can learn our voice. And I think what my clients have been blown away by as I do social media marketing for clients is how effectively the AI represents them. I've actually had some comparisons where, do you prefer this, copywritten materials or this? They've almost always chosen the AI copywritten materials, as I'm learning, even doing the same with graphic designs. Do you like these designs or these designs? They've chosen AI at probably 75% of the time at this point over the human generated content to best represent them. And so if that's where it is today in 2024, I think it's going to just be even bigger and better. And so I think it needs to be a part of our content generation processes.
Well, I have a couple of questions and some thoughts, but first I'll let Katie respond. Any thoughts on this, Katie?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's definitely a lot of things that are happening in AI that are really exciting, and creating content is one of them, where I'm going to talk about that a little bit more too as well. So, but I do think that, like, using it to just make your workflow easier is amazing and so good. And I'm excited about what that looks like for 2024.
I totally agree. I think from a productivity perspective, especially touching on what Nils mentioned, AI generated content because I just want to give two perspectives to our audience, because one of my questions is, I can almost visualize our audience. I can hear their head voice from here saying, "What? Faceless content? What are you talking about? Aren't we all about the gospel? Are we all about authenticity and being there? And how do you be spirit led when you don't have a face? How do you, all those questions? I can hear them. Totally. So my question to you, Nils, is how do we balance between productivity, which is what Katie said, which AI is an incredible tool. So because content creation is a pain, sometimes it takes time. It's a problem. So it just takes resources and time, and AI is going to help us immensely in that space become more productive. But at the same time, we don't want AI to become replace us in a sense. So how do we even balance this, or do we need to balance it? What are your thoughts?
I have so many thoughts, and I don't, and there's a lot there. I mean, I think to speak to the faceless side of things is, and what that even looks like is I think we actually probably see this in our TikTok feeds or Instagram feeds, where we'll see content where it's, you'll see a lot of content where it's just a camera on a person. The reality is that kind of gets boring. Like I've seen that person. I know what they look like sitting in a chair talking to me. But when you can add visuals to that, basically have their voice with, pictures that are helping to better articulate their story, B-roll type of content with people walking down the street, or just visuals that are maybe enhancing the story. I think at the end of the day, Jesus was the ultimate storyteller. He painted pictures with his words. And I think if we can do a similar thing of like, look, the gospel is not about us. It's not about our face and voice. Now, if God can use our face and voice to better reach people, great. But if he can take our voice and match it maybe with some other visual content that AI is generating, and that helps better capture people's attention to better, more effectively share the gospel with them, then praise God for that opportunity. And so I think it's just looking at it from a different perspective of, look, we're not trying to replace the human element of the God. I mean, it is our calling is the Great Commission to go into all the world and make disciples. And so as we do that, I think we as people need to do that. But I think as we do that, we also need to use every tool possible to do that. And so it's, I think we're just using the tools that are available. And I think it's too measuring where people's attention is. And so this is where I think we want to test some things. And so maybe it's taking your face off of your videos and seeing if it reaches more people. And I think that's all the bottom line to it. I think it's just, and this is where it's stopping being the old guy that says, well, this is how we have always done it, so this is how we're going to do it. Right. And I think we've got to shift our mindset with that we just if you're ever saying, well, this is how we've always done it, that should be your first red flag. Maybe it's time to do things a little differently.
We need to get out of our old mindset. Really, I also want to encourage all our audience, think of AI differently. Don't go into the negative. There's a lot of negative things we can talk about. There's safety, there is ethics, there is process, there is policies, all those stuff. But look at it as a tool, like Nils mentioned. It's important for us to use that tool effectively. In fact, you're going to hear all of us talk about AI, whether it is Katie's perspective. So from our angles, from specialized topics, AI is touching every single part of our digital media ministry. So I'm going to talk about AI from an advertising perspective. Katie's going to talk about AI from a church comm perspective, because without AI, 2024 trends is a conversation we cannot have.
Just want to quickly remind you about our special giveaway that we have for this webinar. 1 hour of coaching with one of the MII expert coaches. These are people who are hard to get. They are highly in demand and they're busy. And these are experts with a couple of decades of experience. So people can really help you move the needle in 2024. So you do not want to miss this chance to get an hour with an MII coach. So stay till the end. Thank you. Now let's get back to our conversation.
What are the trends that you are seeing, Katie? Take us into it.
For sure. There's so many different ways to create content now, especially utilizing AI. I have seen so many really fun uses for AI and how people are using it. Like Neil said, back in the day, we used to just do text content, and text content is still relevant. That's the funny part, is that it's not just video. You got to have text content too. There's captions on your videos, but also beyond that, taking your sermon transcript, you can go to YouTubetranscript.com and you actually grab the transcript of your YouTube sermon, right? And then copy and paste that into ChatGPT, say, I want 5 quotes. I want what you think will be the most viral social media clips. I want, you to make this into a blog post. Then I want you to make and write 5 discussion questions for small groups. And it's amazing how you can just reutilize this one piece of content that you created. And like you said, Nachi, it's so easy to think, well, that, where does God come into this, right? Like, but at the same time, like the sermon hopefully wasn't AI generated. It could have been AI helped generated, but for the most part, it should be spirit led. And from that, we can create pieces of content that help our congregation and our community. So I think I'm really excited about how we can utilize that to go from one sermon to multiple pieces of content, a blog that helps our SEO on our website, because often on our website, our sermon or our one piece of content is just an embedded video, and that's it. And there's no SEO value to that, really, if there's just one video embedded on a page. I mean, there's SEO content for the YouTube channel thing, but that's going to YouTube, not onto your website. So if you want more people to come to your website, what you need to do is like take that YouTube transcript, turn it into a blog post, or even put the transcript there so that people can read along, those kind of things, just so it's more searchable, right? Like people can actually find it. I think putting questions beneath it, like how can this apply to me? Reflective questions I think are really good. But too, there's so many other uses that I think are really fun, like video announcements. Have you ever written a video announcement, Nachi? I don't know, for your church, like a script for video announcements. This is a terrible activity. Yeah. I don't know anybody who's like, I can't wait to write a video announcement script for my church. What is so great is that now you can just write like the 5 events and say, write me a video announcement script, and it will write the script for you. Yeah, and you don't have to do that, and say, I want it in natural voice, those kind of things. And you can use ChatGPT, you can use Claude. I actually found that Claude, to me, speaks better, more like a human than ChatGPT does, which I thought was interesting because I am a huge ChatGPT user. I actually just started using Claude like a couple of days ago for this, and I was like, oh wow, it can capture my voice a lot better, even though I've been training ChatGPT for a while now. So I think that's interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of advances in that. Canva too actually has a brand voice tool now, so you can put your brand voice inside of Canva. And it can do Magic Write as well, which is really awesome. So if you've got a free nonprofit account, Canva, you can use that to generate copy and then generate presentations from that copy. It is wild. And so I think that's really fun, just because I think it saves time, but it also creates so much more content from like one piece of content that we have centrally created, an evergreen piece of content that doesn't change. And I think that can be used in a nonprofit world too. There's plenty of content that we're creating for our communities that needs to be disseminated into shorter pieces of content to share via social media, because again, the reach is going to be so much further if we take that one long piece of content and kind of disseminate it into different things, because people learn usually by reading it, by seeing it, and then by doing it, right? And so if they read it like in a blog post and then they listen to it via like a video, and then they actually do it with you, maybe through reflective questions or whatever, those things I think will help as we are continuing to reach more people. What I've told a lot of people is that I don't think AI is going to take your job, but I think the people who know how to use AI will take your job. And so I think like figuring out how these tools work and playing with them now is so smart, so that you don't just like stay ahead. I think just so you stay with like current, as it continues to go along. And something else that, a lot of people feel that, well, AI is like doing my job. That's not it. Here's the thing, like AI to me is like a wheelbarrow, and you're trying to build a house. You've got all these bricks, right? You're putting the bricks in a wheelbarrow instead of carrying 2x2 over to build a house. Okay, so it's just making your life a lot easier and simpler, and not like replacing you. It's just helping you. And so at the end of the day, like no one can sound exactly like you. AI is a computer. It's only as smart as you are. And so it's going to help you do your job faster, make your life a little more simpler, which is what I was saying at the beginning. I kind of want to just go back to how can I make all of this so much more simple? You don't have to learn all of these tools. Have a handful that you love and you use on a daily basis. Like Niels was saying, he uses these few, and stick with those. I think too, like I wrote about this the other day, understanding your people is a lot more important than picking tools and evaluating tools. And so what you can do, to better understand your people is going to be the best use of your time. And if it's not utilizing tools, then that's okay.
Just one more reminder for you to hit that Q&A. If you have any questions, do leave them in the Q&A section. Just hit that button. You can share your questions, your thoughts, your comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, Nils, I know a lot of this is echoing what you started off with. Any other thoughts based on what Katie's mentioned here?
Yeah, I think Katie made a great point too of being careful with maybe not building too many tools, because we can get shiny object syndrome chasing new AI tools and products and things like that. And maybe you'll find a better one, but the time you spent even looking for that, testing it, can create some inefficiencies. And so I think some ways it's kind of like just lock in on a couple of key tools that you believe are going to help accomplish your goal. I from a marketing standpoint too, I'm a Gary Vaynerchuk fan, and he often talks about you have pillar content, which is your long form content, and then you have micro content, which is more your shorts, your clips, your quotes, things like that. And the church and churches in particular have the ultimate pillar content in a weekly sermon that's being created and generated that can be clipped up and done things. So I think using AI, as Katie mentioned, on the front end of helping you create your sermon. Now, it doesn't mean it's preaching your sermon or even making the whole sermon, but it's a great research tool as you think about, like, look, we used to just have a Bible and maybe we could go to a library to help prepare for our sermon. Now we have the internet. Well, now we have AI, that's basically ultimate research assistant for us in preparing our sermons. And then on the back end, you have these tools that can then clip up your sermon, that can then create transcripts of your sermon, as Katie was talking about. So there's tools for both the front end of your core pillar content and the back end of then helping you better distribute it and clip it up. So these tools are just unbelievable how valuable they can be to create both efficiency and effectiveness with your content.
And AI can't replace your experience.
No.
That's the thing. Like when you're writing a sermon, you can get all that now, like all that historical research and write all these things, pull in all these sources via AI now in a really beautiful, intricate way to preach a great sermon if you're just preaching it on that. But here's the thing, like, I think your spiritual experience, like, is going, and your wisdom is going to come to the forefront in the next 10 years. Like your actual lived experience is going to be a really important part of your journey, your spiritual journey. And so, and it always has been. I think that now, though, more than ever, that's going to be a huge part of preaching and learning how to preach, because the 3-point sermon, you can write that via AI. That's easy to generate, but having a unique thought and having a unique experience, you can't generate that.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing from both of you is that AI and your core competency or your core calling has to go hand in hand in 2024 if you're going to make an impact for the kingdom. Is that right? Is that the right way to look at it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now we'll go back to Katie for the next trend. So 2024 trends, what is the next trend you have for us, Katie?
Yeah, of course. I think we've kind of discussed this just a little bit, but of course, creating some short sermon clips for engagement. So, like Nils was saying, having that long form content is really important on YouTube. It's actually playing really well on YouTube now. But having those shorter clips that like engage people and point them to your YouTube shorts or point them to TikTok, I think is going to continue to grow. So, of course, using that pillar content, that evergreen content that people can reach back and watch more quickly. Also, too, like creating sermon content that's not necessarily from the sermon. I think it's going to be really important. Like you were saying, creating clips that are meant to be short. I think it's going to continue to have relevance because you need to be addressing your audience. And so a lot of times with a sermon, you're addressing the audience that is your congregation. And so creating content that helps address this to a wider audience, I think is going to be really important. And I think you can use that sermon to create content like on a weekly basis. You've got your guide essentially of like what you're going to talk about each week. But again, finding that person who's going to be that face. Like you said, Niels, I think there's going to be a lot of faceless AI. There's going to be a lot of like videos with, an ocean in the background and some voiceover and that kind of stuff. I do think that's going to be a big part. But two, I think at the end of the day, like social media is social. And I do think that like faces still matter. And so how can we, create that kind of, I don't know, relationship with our viewer? I think that's going to continue to be more important. But yeah, just creating those shorter clips and figuring out ways to distribute them at different times and what that looks like, I think is going to be a big part. But using you can use Opus. I like using, actually, I record a lot of my videos in Riverside FM. And Riverside will actually automatically create those short clips too, which is really awesome. So very similar experience to, Zoom. And I think creating what that might look like is going to be probably the next big part of iteration of how we create content on the web.
What I'm immediately thinking about is one of my clients is a church outside of Houston, Texas that has maybe and I said this a couple of weeks ago, they had about 2,000 Instagram followers, and I'm just doing some coaching with them, and I said you need to do more reels and clip out of the sermon. Well, and it made me look good, but it just kind of happened to happen. And this happens sometimes. Is one of their clips, and the pastor had a great sermon illustration where he was on a ladder and kind of jumping between these two ladders, and it went viral on Instagram, and they've had over 2.5 million views on this video. And obviously their Instagram account jumped, but what they also saw is a surge of new visitors literally the next Sunday, because that is what can happen. And you don't know when those moments are going to happen. And that's where I think you just have to keep doing it and keep creating. And maybe you'll never have a viral moment like that, but I think it's one of those things too. And what it really provided, I think more than anything, it was the ultimate invitation opportunity for their church members to share their church easily in a very bite-sized format with their friends. And it was an incredible tool. And so clipping your sermon is a way to basically I feel like it's almost like people passing out samples at the mall of a food. And if you like it, you're going to probably go buy the whole thing, and so I think it's just, if you're creating it, why not, go to that next level? Because you're putting so much time and energy into that content. Creating those clips are just so valuable.
Yeah, that's good.
So true. So true. So Katie, what are some of the, can you give us some examples to help people get their head around when you're talking about short sermon clips? Is it just from the sermon, or is it something that you record before the sermon or after? I know some pastors do that before they get on stage. They kind of do a, short clip saying, this is what I'm going to talk about. Is that good? Or what are some of the trends that you are seeing in the church comm group?
Yeah, I think a little bit of all of that for sure. Like creating again that content that is just facing and talking. I think too, like more not relational content, but content that has more than one person having that kind of conversation, I think is really good. I think showing people like actually reacting and doing this kind of things, I think is interesting. So I do think we're going to see a lot more of that coming up. And, with different tools that we're using, I think we're going to have just a variety of different ways to reach people for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And just one thing that I want to touch on is who gets to be the face like we started. I know we touched on that early on, but just Katie, from your perspective, especially church comm. So considering that the pastor can't do, everything. So if there is a requirement, would you say it's okay for you to have the face of the volunteers, or what kind of, and also how do we ensure the quality process of the whole thing? So what has been your experience? I know many of the members in the group have talked about it. I am part of the church comm group, so
Yeah.
I kind of have seen some of the conversations. So when you give it to a volunteer, do you just, let them do what they want, or how do you put systems in place, or do
No,
you have
you
a
probably
staff?
shouldn't just let a volunteer do what they want. There definitely should be like some kind of social media style guide or brand guide that's directing them and in ways that are standard to the brand in some kind of way for sure. But I do think you should not be afraid for it to be someone else other than the pastor. I think that's been the big thing that I had to like overcome working at a church and working with nonprofits, is that they really want to be the voice of this one person the entire time. That one person doesn't have enough time, especially if they're a pastor, they're shepherding a church, and that takes like an enormous amount of time. So I think it's okay for you to learn to trust someone else with your church's voice, because at the same time, like, your church is people. It's not a building. It's definitely not just your pastor. And so I think figure out ways to get more of your members involved, more of the people in your community involved, more of the people, staff at your nonprofit involved, I think is going to be really important in the next few years, just because different voices speak to different people. They see themselves in different situations in different people. And so I think the more you can pull in, diversity matters. And so having more people represented, I think, is going to be really important. So other than just like this one person who is your pastor, I think having all these different voices is going to just increase the reach.
Yeah. Very important. So it's important for some of us to really listen to the words that says, let go, and kind of trust people and release that responsibility to others. Thank you so much, Katie. Those two were very important, very useful as we get into 2024, some of the mindset shifts that we need to have about short clips and also about AI, using AI. So I just want to lead our audience into the advertising space. Now that we've talked about digital media strategy, we talked about communication, that I just want to take them into advertising. So in advertising, I'm going to share two trends, and I'll pause and get thoughts from both of you on that. So based on the multiple news items that we track and so on, one of the big trends that I'm seeing with respect to advertising in 2024 is the emergence of subscription models in social media platforms. So if you see, Meta kind of jumped into it early on, but really Elon Musk is the one who started this all after he bought the X platform and started saying, there's got to be a different way of revenue generation. And after seeing the success on the X platform, even though Meta had that idea earlier, Meta jumped on. And now what we have is, for those of you who are not aware or you're not tracking the news, if you're not, you should probably track the news that we put together every week, which is top 5 news items. And so if you've not been tracking the news, the two big things that are happening right now are Meta Verified. So Meta has this program called Meta Verified, where they are saying, just pay the subscription and we won't show you ads. And last week there was a very big announcement. What started out with just a verification blue tick last week, just a couple of weeks ago, took a twist where in European Union, Mark Zuckerberg said, we will release Meta Verified without ads. So my question to you is, as ministries, if Meta, which is the biggest platform that you and me use to reach people, to run our digital campaigns, Instagram and Facebook are not going to show ads in certain regions just because people are paying them subscription, how are you going to reach them for the gospel, for the good news, for whatever kind of campaigns you're doing? So that's my first question. And in 2024, I trust me, it's going to get bigger, because X platform has come up with a Premium Plus, which again says no ads. That's like the first thing, no ads. And this is not new. The thing is, I mentioned earlier in our conversation that social media is kind of going back to the basics. If you think about it, YouTube Premium has been there for a long time. If you think about it, LinkedIn Premium subscription, LinkedIn, in fact, was the first one to recognize this model. So social media platforms have had this premium pay model for a very long time. It's just that Meta and X are just catching up now, but they're tweaking it in such a way that they never said no ads for a very long time, but now they're boldly saying no ads, even though ads is the chunk of their revenue. So I think it's going to be interesting to see in 2024 how this evolves. But my input to you is, what can you do? I have two suggestions for all of you as this trend evolves. One is build your community. Because even if Meta and X and everybody, YouTube says, you can't run ads for whatever reason. I mean, not just subscription model. Suppose they say you're a faith-based organization, we won't let you run ads. I know many of you face that. We've helped a lot of ministries who come and say, YouTube banned our ads, Meta banned our ads. So that's going to happen. So first is build your community, because if you build your community will come with you. It could be your own platform, or it could be a different platform that you move to, and you can pull your community, and you can build your community with emails, with phone numbers, getting their direct contact. So build your community, build a direct relationship with your audience. That would be my first input with respect to this trend. And second is, diversify your promotional strategy. Don't just have ads as your promotional strategy. Mix it up with organic, mix it up with influencer marketing, mix it up with events, mix it up with offline stuff. It's interesting. Just a couple of weeks ago, TikTok came up with this offline ads option. So if you release an ad on TikTok, your ad can actually run on banners and on, screens in events, in bars, in hotels, and so on. So it's interesting. There are ways to mix up your promotional media budget. So as ministries, I think we should think out of the box. Don't just think about advertising on just one or two platforms, Meta, YouTube ads, Facebook ads, but try to diversify. So that's my first trend. So over to you guys. What are some of your thoughts, Nils?
Yeah, I thought, you nailed it, Nachi. It's a really interesting. I was thinking about YouTube as you were talking about it. I was like, oh, what about YouTube? And how I don't think I've seen an ad on YouTube in a couple of years. And at the end of the day, the way people break through on YouTube, it's not like new messages aren't getting out on YouTube. You do it by having better content. And I think at the end of the day, if we focus on creating better content, I think our organic will increase. But I think with that said, ads aren't going to go away. They just maybe are going to become less effective as we have known them to be. And so it's not like we got to just prepare for ads to be done. I just think we have to adapt to a changing landscape. And part of that adaptation is knowing we can't just pay for audience and have audience. We need to provide value, and we should have been doing this already. And hopefully we already are, but it's the quality of our content matters now, and it will matter even more tomorrow. And so that's how I think we best prepare for this developing future.
Yeah, ads have always been, they've had some kind of obstacle or a stumbling block always. There was this iOS, updates, there's always something coming against ads. And right now it looks like this whole subscription model. So we'll see how it goes. Katie, thoughts?
Yeah, it really reminds me, it takes me back to like marketing or communications 101 of earned, owned, and paid media, right? And I think that we're going to see a big turn towards owned media in the next 10 years. I do think there's a decentralization happening for a lot of things. A lot of things are moving away from just social media back to websites, which I think is such an interesting thing, because that's where we started, was everybody had their own website. I can remember before MySpace having my own website. And I was young, but having like my own journal and that kind of thing, running my own space, even though it was like static. And then there was like cute PHP. A lot of nerds out there will know what I'm talking about. And so I think we're going to see a return back to that, which I think is interesting, or return back to open source software and decentralization, what that looks like. But two, I think we're going to see a ton of these social media platforms follow suit of being paid for. And, will the users continue wanting to be there? That's the question, and so I think it makes sense for a lot of platforms, because like you said, there's so many laws and stuff coming up that are going to change the internet innately. And I think it should. Like, I think privacy is really important. I think you have a right to privacy. But at the same time, like, we have to figure out how we reach our audiences differently. And so what that might look like is, I think a lot of it is creating community. And I think that's going to uniquely change the internet, because I think a lot of people think of creators as being a creator one-to-many, but I really do think it's a many-to-many connection that the internet is going to be, is going to change the internet. I think that's what's going to be revolutionary, is those many-to-many connections and what that looks like. And I'll continue to harp on that until the day I'm dead. So I just think that, and that's the thing, that's the church too, is that it's a many-to-many connection. It is not just one-to-many. It's not you just like the pastor. Like, if it was that, you wouldn't keep coming back to church. Like, it's because you have a community. It's because you're innately, you feel like you belong there, and you have the space where you are connected and you feel known and those kind of things. I think the internet has made us increasingly lonely, but it's also a place where we can be connected. And so I want to see how we will continue to change that in the next 10 years.
Yeah. You are a pioneer in the whole community building space, Katie, and I know even Facebook came to learn from you. I remember the time they invited you to their head office to talk about how you built the ChurchCom group. So give our audience, maybe, I know it's like not part of the topic, but give us one or two tips on community building, because just before you start that, let me give you a minute to think about it, but just want to talk about Web3, because I know the hype of Web3 has died down. Nobody talks about that word anymore and so on. But I think in 2024, community building, Web3 is going to be the version in which community can be built. So give us a couple of tips. How can we build a strong community as we look at these ad issues and all that kind of stuff?
Well, Web3 is conduit, right? I think it's the way we get there, but it's not the end all. Because I think AI is the way we get there, but it's not the end all. And so a community, like starting one, how do we get started? That's difficult, because you can get started in a million different ways. It's very different from becoming a creator. Becoming a creator is easy. In comparison, I think that you can create amazing content. You can go out and hire people to make your videos and help you edit, and you can start blogging and start writing, and then start publishing and start making YouTube videos that are longer. Those kind of things. If you're consistent and you're consistently creating quality stuff, that you're gonna become a creator. You can become an influencer. You can gain an audience. But gaining and creating a community is different, because it's very unique. You're creating content to connect people, and you're connecting people, and you're getting to know people, and you're learning what their values are and how they connect. And so it's a different thing to be a community builder online than it is to be a creator. And not saying that one is better than the other. They're just different. They're totally different. They're in totally different spectrums. They're both hard. Let me hear me say that. I think creating consistent quality content for your audience is extremely difficult, but also consistently creating content that connects and you also learn about your people is incredibly hard. So getting started as a community builder, it depends on your audience, or it depends on your community. Like, where are they? How do they want to connect? And then it's finding those people, and you don't have to have a ton of people to have a community and to have a highly engaged and successful one. I actually think the less people you have, the better for a lot of communities. It's almost like a small church, right? Like when you have a church of 100, you can do some really powerful things because you're interconnected in a different way than a church of 10,000. Don't get me wrong, a church of 10,000 can give $10,000 really quickly, but it doesn't mean the same as a church of 100 that gave 10,000, you know? And so it's totally different. There's so many different specs. I could go on and on about this for a long time, but yeah, thanks for asking. I think that we're going to see a unique shift in what that means for each different platform, honestly.
Yeah, I just want to encourage our audience to deeply think about community building, because really that's the answer. That's the answer for going forward for 2024 and beyond. So the more we move forward, we're going to see a lot of challenges, especially for the faith-based space, both from a governmental perspective, policies perspective, social media perspective. While all of this is going to help us, it's also going to be a challenge. So community is the answer. And later in the show, we'll get to learn more about Katie, how you can contact her. So maybe you can ask questions, learn more about what she's done and so on. All right. Thank you so much. Let me quickly jump into my second trend. With that, we will close the trends conversation and get back to wrapping this up. The second trend that I have in advertising space is, again, coming back to our old topic, AI-driven advertising algorithm. So in 2024, one of the trends that you are going to see is your ads are going to be driven by AI. What does that mean? So far, your ads were driven by algorithms, which were logics that were built within the organization. It still had AI. We didn't know it, but AI was in there in some level, but not at the level that we're seeing today. So what has been happening is, over the last few months, if you track closely, if you go to Google Ads News and Meta's advertising news, developer news, you will see how both Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai of Google, two big platforms that we all depend on for advertising, they keep stressing the role of AI, especially Gen AI, and the other models that they're evolving, their roles in advertising, because both these behemoths depend on advertising for their revenue. So they are using AI in as many ways as possible inside the advertising process. So in 2024, you're going to see more of that. So advertising, as we all know, has various steps. I usually talk about 7 steps, where you think about what you need to advertise for, then you come up with a strategy, then you create the actual ad, and then you execute the ad, and you follow up and analytics and all that. Now, all these 7 steps are going to be impacted by AI. Right from the time when you start, do I really need to advertise? If you ask that question, you can ask that question to ChatGPT. You can just go and say, will ads help me do this? Or a prompt like that. And ChatGPT will start letting you know based on analysis. If you throw in a set of numbers into Claude or ChatGPT, it will analyze it and it will give you an output saying, you are profitable, you're not profitable, you're reaching your metric, you're not, therefore you need advertising. So right from that planning stage to strategizing stage to creation, you can create an image. Now, Google announced just a couple of weeks ago that they are building in Adobe's, the Firefly ability to create images and videos inside Google Ads platform. So even as you are in the process of releasing ads, you can create the video that you need with just text prompts. And so things like that. So AI is going to influence your AI advertising process completely. So whatever all three of us have been talking about with AI, with content creation, that is also applicable to the advertising world. So I know all of you ministries, media ministries, churches listening to us are advertising heavily. You have big ad budgets to reach the entire world for God, for the gospel, and to reach the ends of the earth. And I just want to encourage you, with AI, you can do it much more effectively. In fact, deploying AI in advertising will reduce your costs, will help you be more effective, will get more, reach for the buck. You can really maximize your return on investment, or ROAS, return on ad spend. So just want to encourage you to experiment with it. And the practical tip I want to give you in terms of how to get started is the same thing as what we all discussed earlier, is experiment, start with it, especially if you're releasing Facebook ads inside Facebook Business Manager, Meta Business Manager. Then, it's starting to throw up prompts on, do you want to use AI companion for this and that? Say yes. Don't be afraid. Say yes. Play around with it. Let it automatically, give you some suggestions. If you look at Meta, especially Advantage Plus is basically, AI-driven suggestions. So I would say don't hold back. Don't be afraid. Experiment with it and see how it goes. So that is the trend that I have for 2024. AI impacting your advertising whole cycle. So, guys, what do you think, Katie?
Okay, have you played with Adobe Illustrator AI yet? It is so much fun. I created the cutest panda the other day. I was so excited to have this happy little dancing panda that I could make. There's going to be so many fun things. I mean, I don't know if you've done Midjourney or these like creative things that are going to just change the game. And I'm really excited about what that means, because before I used to spend hours on the internet finding just the perfect picture to go along with my blog post or whatever, And now I can just type it in Midjourney and be like, I need a frustrated person at work. And I can get a million different options of a frustrated person at work. And so I think all these generative AI things are going to continue to just really wow us. I think we're just at the beginning of what that looks like, but I'm excited more than I'm scared. So yeah, Niels.
I think about ads, and ads, I think, are this combination of creative and scientific in how we process them. And I live more on the side. I'm not a real creative person or artistic type of person. And so I do think there's some really cool tools that are going to help with kind of the design, people that have been into advertising, but when it moved from more just copywriting to graphic design and video, it was more challenging. So those tools, I think, are going to be really advantageous. But I think too, on the scientific side, it kind of reminds me of like a calculator, when a calculator came into being. And it's like, would you rather like hand solve a math problem on a piece of paper, or just let a calculator get it exactly right with fewer mistakes and less time? And that's what AI from the scientific side can just say, this is the result you're going to get. We're going to adapt and adjust your ad campaign for maximum effectiveness. And so AI is going to help run honestly, it's going to replace a ton of jobs. And so that's a whole ethical side of AI that we could have a different conversation around. But practically, it's going to create so much efficiency in our ad campaigns as we lean into some of these AI tools that handle the scientific side of when to increase your bid, when to lower your bid, when to, A/B test, all of these different scientific sides of ads. And so it's really exciting. It can feel overwhelming. But I think it's as we've had so many of these conversations, it's another, if you're investing a significant amount of your financial investment into advertising, this is one of those tools that you need to be tapping into to make sure you're stewarding that investment most effectively.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. I think that kind of almost summarizes what we've been talking about, because it's a mindset thing. So all of us have been talking about, I think, to wrap things up. We've talked about short form content. We've talked about AI in content, AI in advertising, AI in communication, and we've talked about some of the trends with respect to building your own community because of subscription models, because of no ad systems. So I think these are some of the things that that's going to come and stand in front of us in 2024 as we all move forward and try to move into various areas of media ministry. So thank you so much for spending our time with us. And Niels and Katie, thank you so much. I can't believe we've come to the end of our time, but it's been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being part of this, both of you.
Yeah,
thank you. Awesome. It's an honor.
So before we close, quickly, how can people get in touch with both of you if they want to know more about what you're doing, learn from you, ask you questions? So Niels,
Yeah, so my name is Nils Smith, Nils Smith, and so if you just Google me, you'll find my social media and different handles, and I've got a website, nilsmith.com. But I'm active and I'm in the DM, so just DM me on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever platform you prefer.
So, Katie?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. My name is Katie Allred, and it's just like it sounds, all in red. And you can find me at katieallred.com, on Instagram, KatieJ because I thought it sounded better. It was like John F. Kennedy. I don't know. And not that Katie Allred wasn't available. It probably was at that time. It's not anymore. Anyway, so yeah, you can find me at Katie Allred. You can also find me at churchcommunications.com. Of course, same thing. I'm in the DM. So send me a DM if you need me on Instagram. That'd probably be the best way.
Excellent. So on behalf of MII, on behalf of David, I just want to thank both of you for spending your precious time with us, sharing these golden nuggets and insights with our audience. Really appreciate that. And thank you. And all the audience, we want to thank you for being part of this. And as you enter 2024, all three of us, we want to wish you the best and pray that God will guide you and lead you in the new year in the best of ways.